Hello and welcome back to the Tin Barn. I'm Pragmatic Lee, and if things go as scheduled, this should be my first video for 2022. I'm hoping and trusting that each and every one of my viewers will have a safe, happy, and healthy new year for the coming year. In today's video, we're going to marry two pieces of Harbor Freight hardware together that weren't necessarily meant to be together as designed. I'll drop the camera down just a little bit and show you what I'm talking about. This is a picture from under the shelter here on the Tin Barn of a Model 600 Harbor Freight winch. I don't know how many years ago it was that I hung it like this. I've had the winch for almost 18 years now. I don't even think Harbor Freight has this particular model 600 anymore, but several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago I guess it was, I needed to get something off my truck and into the Tin Barn, and it was pretty heavy. So I took my old log chain and strung it between this 2x12, or actually it's two 2x12s sandwiched together with plywood in between. So it's 4x12 beam. There's one here, there's one up here at the front of the shelter, and then there's two more behind it. These are only 8 foot apart. But I pulled that chain between the two beams, hooked it, of course, and with the chain run through the these hooks on the electric winch. Now, I was going to videotape taking this down because it would I was going to take it down by myself, and it would have been a somewhat precarious event or activity, because this is pretty heavy. That chain's pretty heavy, and this whole setup is probably, I don't know, 12 feet off the ground, at least 12 feet to the center area. But my grandson and two of his friends were dove hunting in a cornfield in front of the house this morning, and I sent him a message and I said, before you boys head back to your neighborhood, how about stopping by here? I got a couple little projects for you. And I got them to move a few things for me, and while they were here, I have a scaffold we set up underneath it, and those boys got it down in just a minute. My grandson is a little over 6'4", so he could reach a whole lot more than I could. What we want to do in today's project, though, is marry this trolley, I-beam trolley. It's called a 1-ton push trolley, item number 97392 from Harbor Freight. We want to marry it to this. As currently set up, basically want it, let me get the camera a little higher. Where that chain was under the shelter is going to be a 4-inch I-beam, a 4x6 I-beam, 12 foot long. And we want this trolley on the I-beam, of course, but we need a way to hook this to the hoist itself. There are several videos online where people have put a steel plate down on top of the hoist and welded to it a vertical, basically made a T, and put a hole back here and a hole back here, and run this bolt that's in this hoist through those holes. Now, the reason I chose not to do that, a couple reasons. Number one, this is 600, which is rated at 660 pounds single cable, or 1,320 pounds with the cable doubled up, and I usually run it with the cable doubled. 1,300 pounds. This trolley is rated at 1 ton, 2,000 pounds. So if 2 of these were put on here, you'd have 2 tons or 4,000 pounds of trolley for only a 1,300 pound winch. So it's way overkill to put 2 of these trolleys on a small winch like this. The second reason, these trolleys aren't cheap. They're about $75 a piece with tax at Harbor Freight. They're a good quality built item, I will say that about them. And they're adjustable. I think, let me look right quick. Let's see. I think it's from 4-inch to 6-inch that you can, that this trolley will ride on as far as the width of the I-beam. With these washers, ample supply of washers that they supplied, and spacers, you can widen this out or narrow it down to, this is probably about the narrowest it would go. 3-inch. You could get it down to a 3-inch, up to about 6 inches. I am going to use a plate on this, but instead of a vertical T-piece, we're going to mount a piece of 2-inch, I believe that's 2 or 2.5 inch square tubing. We're going to mount that to the plate we're going to bolt on here. And this hole in here, I made this piece or cut it out ahead of time. This will go in between, in place of this hook down here. This hook is primarily designed for something like a cable hoist, as you see in this picture right here. I have this one mounted through a hook in the floor over my welding bench. So I think the first thing we need to do is lay out the bolt hole pattern or measure the bolt hole pattern for the top of this winch. Alright, I got my 12-inch calipers here, and I think we all know the trick of where you take a digital calipers, find the dimension or the diameter of one of the holes, zero that out, and then measure between them. So we're at 3.95 on that axis. And we'll come to this axis, 8.65. So I'm going to transfer those dimensions over to my, this is a piece of 6-inch by 12-inch by 1/4-inch thick steel plate. That'll be mounted here. I'm going to transfer those marks, dimensions over to this and meet you at the drill press. Okay, I got the bolt hole pattern transferred over to the steel plate now. Got them center punched, but I'm going to start off lead hole with about 11/64, 3/16, just a starter hole. Okay, this is a 10mm bolt, but what I've got here at the drill press right now is imperial bits, and that won't quite go in a 3/8. It'll go into 25/64. I'm going to step up 2 steps and go to a 27/64, and that'll give me just a little bit of wiggle room in case I didn't transfer the bolt hole pattern exact. If you'll notice, I'm using this little bump block that I've showed in previous videos that I designed this table for. That way it keeps, should the drill bit bind in the workpiece at all, this will keep it from yanking out of my hand. right, now let's swing over to the little bench top drill press and remove those burrs from the back side. All right, let's go back to the workbench and see if the bolt hole pattern matches up. Okay, let's see how well we did with transferring that bolt hole pattern. All right, that looks like everything matched up. Now what I want to do, all right, let's talk a little bit more about this piece. Again, I made this off camera to no particular size. I had this 2.5 inch square stock, and I cut it 3.5 inches long. When I cut it on the bandsaw, well, there was one end already cut that had been sawed, and when I cut mine on my bandsaw, neither one of those were exactly true. So I set this up in the mill with a square up the side of it, milled one side flat, checking to be sure it stayed plumb the whole time. Then turned it over and set it on that surface that I had just milled, double checked the plumb with the square again, and milled this off. That way I know I've got a good strong or a good flat contact between the two pieces. Now what I want to do, instead of centering this up somewhere, I want this piece to be above or centered on the winch spool itself. So I'm going to turn this up on its side right quick. I'm going to take my little square and just give a mark up here on where the inside of that, to the sides of that spool. Now I fully realize that the cable is not going to be in the center of that spool the whole time, but this should get it pretty much balanced on there. All right, I've got the center already laid out when I did the bolt hole pattern, and I'm going to center this on there. I'm going to carry this over to the welder now and weld this up. I'm not going to try to carry the camera in there simply because you can't see anything welding with a stick welder to begin with. And plus my welding is not anything I necessarily want recorded. But I will get a good bead of weld all the way around this, good penetration into both pieces. Then we'll come back and look at the spacing to get the trolley mounted on this. First thing I've got to be absolutely conscious of, though, is which direction this hole goes in. So if the trolley is sitting on top like that, I need this hole perpendicular to the winch. I'll bring you back in just a few minutes. Okay, I got it all welded up. Not too bad if I do say so myself. I put a small bead around tying the two pieces together, and then I went back and lapped it over for probably a 3/8 to a 1 inch, 3/8 to a 1/2 inch overlap there. I did a little grinding right around where my bolts go, but other than that, I think it turned out really good. Now, to get the spacing properly on the trolley and this piece of 2.5 inch square stock, I'm lucky enough to have a piece of the same I-beam. I had a short piece here that I could clamp onto the workbench and more or less just keep measuring and working back and forth until I was comfortable with it. what I was able to do over here on this, the spacing we need is going to be up here. And I was able to measure this flat spot over to the flat edge here. And that gave me about 3/4 inch on each side. And from that, I was able to do some calculations and determine these were the length of bushings that I needed. You saw already, I think you saw already, where I also cut a bushing and wedged inside this square stock to keep that from ever collapsing. Not that I think there would be ever that much pressure from these bolts. Let's let's do a quick mock-up of it. And we'll take it back apart and paint this piece. And I think once I look at it, I think there may be one more addition I need to make to this, but we'll check that out shortly. I decided not to cut the bushings that came with it. Just thought I'd keep them as they were. This bolt is a little over 1 inch. I drilled this piece 1 inch and then used a boring head on it to get it to the proper size. As I say, I mocked all this up off camera, so I already know the washer count necessary. The final installation, I'll put another washer on this outside out here as well, and also the lock nut. I should have took a picture of it before I tore it down before. These washers go on the outside. All right, let me turn this back light off here. Take out a little bit of the glare. All right, so that's given us flat to flat, just a little over 4 inches. And that's what this flange on here is 4 inches. This is pretty heavy as it is. And this mock-up piece I've got over here is not quite long enough. So I'm going to break this back down again and carry it in pieces back in there to the welding table. Okay, I've got a piece of the 4x6 I-beam bolted down to or clamped down to the welding table now. I've got the trolley mounted with the adapter plate. This, of course, will roll as such. The winch will be hanging under here through these 4 bolt holes. And even though I have this centered on where the winch spool is, I'm sure there's still going to be some attempts to tilt one direction to the other, especially as the cable takes up on the spool. Now I have leveled this now in relation to the distance here and the distance here, and got that the same, because again what I'm expecting to happen is maybe it will winch or pull down as such, or maybe even the other direction. So where I had this level, I measured in the distance in here and took 3/8 of an inch off of that. I want some clearance in here. I'm going to have to put two pieces of this beam together probably in the next video, but there'll be a 1/4 inch plate underneath. So I wanted room for that pin to travel in there, but that won't allow but just a little bit of tilting on there. So let's go over to the lathe and make these pins. We're going to put one of them back here and one of them back here. All right, for these bumper rods or legs, we'll call them, I'm using some 5/8 rod. The only reason I'm using something that big is I didn't have any 1/2 inch. I didn't have enough 1/2 inch to finish this project. So I'm going to put this in the lathe. Off camera, I simply cut them to the approximate length with a witness mark down here to the exact length. But I carried them over to the belt grinder and just rounded this end off just a little bit. Nothing special, and that's just to help it right up on that plate that we're going to weld onto the bottom of the I-beams. So let's face it to the actual length now. I've got a witness mark on there. Now we're going to drill and tap this. I'm going to use a 1032 in there. Again, I'm using what I've got in stock. Next thing we'll use is our 2-fluted taper tap. And finally we'll use our 2-fluted bottom tap. Alright, the next thing we'll need to do is bring our adapter plate back in here to the mill and drill and counterbore the holes, pass-through holes that our screw will go through to mount into this. Okay, the original plan was to put one of these bump legs or posts on each end screwed down, but as you can see, there's a lot of weld over here, and I really don't want to grind out that weld. So what we're going to do is, as originally planned, is drill for one of these bump posts over here. Excuse me. Then the other one that we had planned over here, I think I'm just going to kind of sand that down to where it will go over that weld itself, set over that, and tack weld this onto the side of the square piece we have here. So let's get set up to drill this one end right here. And we're going to drill this with a, let's see, I believe this was a 13/64. I'm sorry, a 3/16. A 3/16 that will clear number 10 screw. Now we have our countersink bit, and we'll run that in. Remember, this part mounts flush up against the winch, flat up against the winch. Hopefully I got a large enough countersink out. I may have to go get a larger one. Yep, I'm going to have to get one a little bit larger. All right. It's a good flush fit now. Like I say, I'm going to take this other one over to the grinder, and I'm going to take some of this off and get that welded on. But I'll bring you back over at the welding bench when we get ready to put this thing together for and do a quick recap. All right, I got the two posts, this one screwed down and this one welded on. Got them installed now. Let's do a quick reassembly. Again, we start with our pin, a bushing on each end. Okay, this will be double nutted on each end as a locking mechanism. But for right now, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to take this apart again when we get ready to hang it on the beam. So I'm just going to go single nut right now. And we'll try to get them spaced about the same. Now, this and the winch, I've weighed the pieces separately, and together this whole assembly weighs 65 pounds, and that's a little bit more than I want to try to pick up at one time. So I'm going to hang this on a piece of the I-beam. I've got it clamp down to the welding table now. I'm going to hang this on first and then see if I can get the winch maybe up on my knees and get it mounted. Okay, hopefully you can see what I was talking about with these, before we get the winch on there, with these stop bumpers here, or legs. As you can see, that will stop it from pivoting in that direction. And I doubt there'll be much chance of it pivoting back there, since the pull cable will be right here. But we do have that pin there as well. Alright, I'm going to see if I can muscle this winch up under there. When the time comes to actually hang this 10-12 feet up in the air, I will definitely get my grandson and a couple of his friends over here to help me. But just for a little show and tell right now, I'm going to see if I can manhandle this up there. All right, we got it hung. Now let's see if we can just tighten it up a little bit. All right, there we have it. Okay, that appeared to be binding a little bit, and it was. This stop post that I put under the front up here was rubbing under the bottom of the frame. But I put just a load lever, which always hangs on it anyhow. Just the weight of that was all it took, was to have enough to get that post, stop that post from rubbing under the bottom. In the next video, I hope to be the next video, I'll get my grandson and his friends over to help me, and we'll mount this I-beam. I've got two 6-foot pieces I'm going to put together ahead of time, but I'll get those pieces put together and get those boys over here, or young men, young bucks over here to help me get this in place, and then get the winch and the trolley in place. And then I think maybe you can see better how it's all going to work. I hope you've enjoyed this fabrication video. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.